What's wrong with you people?
Welcome to Not Another Baptist Podcast. My name is Matt Hensley, the pastor of Plymouth Park Baptist Church in Irving, Texas, which just so happens to be nowhere near a hurricane. And I'm joined, as most always, by Dr. Kyle, non-alcoholic beerman, who earlier this week was nearly in the crosshairs of a hurricane, but made it out.
I think that was the closest I've ever been to a hurricane. And let me tell you, so you and I are both in Texas, kind of on the fringes of Tornado Alley. So occasionally we are faced with the very rare possibility that a tornado might strike us, right? Listen, I'm okay with that because like folks in a hurricane, like this thing is going to hit somewhere between Texas and New Orleans. We don't really know where. And it might just be a tropical storm or it might be a category 3. We don't know. We can't tell you. Should you evacuate? Maybe, but maybe not. Dude, and that's like, for some of these folks, that's multiple times a year that you're dealing with that. So listen, I will take the remote chance of a tornado hitting every day. All the time.
I hope these aren't famous last words. But
I know. Listen. Statistically speaking, you're not likely to get hit by a tornado, right?
Yeah.
Like your house.
They don't. Yeah, they don't cover an
hurricane
entire
is like
state. No. It's like. Anyway, we're not making light of tornadoes by any means.
No.
We're glad and got to see some not so great news and some good news from New Orleans in the sense of how they weathered that storm. And so we want to pray for them that the cleanup, we're not making light of it. It is just one of those things that we had Ugo, our associate worship director at the church, was leading worship for your event there in Louisiana.
In Lafayette, Louisiana. Yep.
We desperately needed to get him out onto the flight. And for any of that
and listen, when you are headed to a place where the CBS News, Mr. Hurricane Jim Cantore is also going, that's not a comfort. Like that's like when like Reed Timmer with his Dominator vehicle is like heading to your community during tornado season. Like that's not where you want to be, right? And that's where Jim Cantore came to Lafayette, like around the same time that our event was hitting, because he was waiting for the hurricane. So really, really interesting, but a great event that we had in a Revive event in Lafayette, Louisiana. I got to see part of it after a very last minute trip up to Tupelo, Mississippi, filling in for Mark Clifton, who came down sick at the last minute. And then I got to drive across the states of Mississippi and Louisiana to get to Lafayette. So fun week, man. Great week. Two great events. Matt, you'll like this. I didn't get to hear Richard's talk, but I came on stage right after Richard Blackaby. So there you go. I'm going to add that to my resume now. I shared the platform with Richard Blackaby. So there you go.
Did you experience God?
Yes, it was fantastic. It was a great event. I assume the part that I got to see was great. I'll put it that way.
Kyle, I love you. I'm glad and I'm grateful for the work you guys do, because one of the things that y'all do is really help pastors with what we're going to talk about today. So today we're just going to kind of riff on 5 practical, simple things you can do today to keep you going in ministry tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, and so forth. And number 1, here's what I want you to do. If you're listening to this on your computer right now, or if you're listening to this in your iPhone and your computer is near you, I want you to continue listening, because we have wonderful things to say. Said no one ever. But continue to listen. But we encourage you to open up onto your computer whatever file contains your resume, right-click it, and delete it.
Yep.
Kyle, why should our listeners delete their resume?
Well, listen, it is far too easy if you have a resume sitting, even if it's buried deep in your files, you probably know where that is. It is far too easy after a bad Sunday, after a bad business meeting, after a bad phone call to say, you know what, I'm just going to put this out there and see what happens. Now, let me add a caveat here. God might move you. Okay, that happens. You and I, Matt, have experienced that, right? Where you feel like this thing has come to an end, and now it's time for a new season of ministry. That happens. But here's what I also know. It is far too easy to confuse the state convention's job board with the Holy Spirit when it comes time to move. So listen, and if that time comes and God is moving you and he's connecting you somewhere, writing a new resume is not that hard. And so listen, delete it, get rid of it, so that in those really hard moments, you don't have that temptation to go, I'm just gonna send this thing out.
Yep. And just a simple pro tip. I know some of our guys may have LinkedIn, some of you may not. One of the hardest parts for me when, like even with Plymouth Park, I didn't even have a resume. I had to put one together because I had done what I encourage people to do. I was loving life as an AMS, and this was one of those things that God was clearly opening up. And they're like, "Hey, can you give us a resume?" They had got my name from somebody else and wanted me to come in and talk about some church revitalization efforts and whatever. And just one thing led to another. And I'm like, guys, I don't have a resume. I can put together like, hey, I've been here, I've been here, I've been here, I've been here, and y'all can fill in the blanks. But I can't put something together really quick.
Yes.
But what I did do is I had LinkedIn where I had all of my, my employment over the last few years. And I was able to remember, okay, when did I start here? When did I finish here? Where was it? And then I usually went ahead and had on the LinkedIn, what I did there, maybe sermon texts that I went through or books of the Bible or, stuff like that I was able just to, at that point, copy and pasted. It took me a few hours at that point. Now, look, if you're a situation where you clearly need to put one together, you want to take some time to do it right, make it clean, all of that kind of stuff. These are probably two different things that we're talking about with my situation. I was just trying to put something together so they could have it in front of them real quick. There was typos on it. I had the formatting was all wrong, but they got it, and we were good to go. But when you use LinkedIn, that's a good way, or Facebook, where you have your past workforces or workplaces. That's just a good way, because I don't ever remember when I start somewhere, when I left somewhere, maybe even what I did, because I don't remember what I did last week. And so that's a good way to use Facebook and some of those to keep up with your address, or not your addresses, your timetable and whatever, when you do need to put those together. But take away that temptation. It's almost like the fat kid that's trying to lose some weight, and you just leave, cheesecake out in the fridge. You're going to eat it. And so it's the same thing with you. And if you've got that resume and it's sitting there, you're like, hey, I'm going to send that to Kyle, see if he can find me a big job at NAM.
And here's the other thing. And to send that to me, you can email mhensley.
Don't do that.
But listen, when it's time to go, if God seriously, like if he is moving you somewhere else, Pastor, hear this. He does not need your help finding the next spot. If it is truly time to go, if we believe in the sovereignty of God and believe that he is moving you, he will connect you to the place where you need to be through relationships, through a phone call, through something. He doesn't need your help sending out dozens and dozens of resumes. All right, there, I'm done. I'll get off that soapbox now.
There we go. Kyle wants you never to be able to move up in life. That's what he just said. Number 2, find an encourager. So clearly take Kyle off that list. Find an encourager. And then 2A, I would say, or 3, be an encourager. Sometimes one of the best things you could do when you're discouraged is just to help somebody else, lift somebody else up, mutually encourage one another, but find an encourager. Now, we've talked about this before. There's multiple episodes where we've talked about encouragement and so forth, but there are a few ways that you can pull that off. Go to your local association, plug in, be a part of it. You'll start meeting some similar pastors in similar situations. Find you an older guy that you can be mentored by or encouraged by. Find you a younger guy that you can mentor and encourage. Find time to get in front of your associational missionary and say, hey, I need this. I need some guys that you think would be good encouragers. Here are some people that are really active. If that doesn't work, go to your state. You've got area reps that are all around. Usually just about all of our states have area reps or kind of church representatives that are out and about, just kind of driving around beyond the executive director. So maybe you don't get to the executive director, but there's probably somebody in a position that you can get close to that can connect you with the right people. Go to those annual meetings. Go to those pastor fellowships. Many of them have things throughout the year, and that's some of the places you can find an encourager. And then I think it seems like pastors that I talk to, I talk about them too, I guess. I'm, Baptist gossip. No, I'm just kidding. Pastors that I talk to, it seems like all of us, God tends to bless us with that, what I might call like that person of peace in our church, like somebody that you can trust, somebody that you can confide in, somebody that will encourage you, lift you up, that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's more than one. I know at Mayhill that was, Valerie, my secretary, was a great encourager. Her and Preston, Mitch Hibbard and the Hibbard families were super encouragers throughout. There were others, like it was a very encouraging church, and the same thing is true here at Plymouth Park Baptist Church. There's a number of people that encourage us there, and there's some that I'm able to open up with even more, like Keith Patton, who probably will be listening to this podcast. And I appreciate him. And people like that are such a value to a pastor. But Kyle, what other ways or why is it valuable to find and be an encourager?
Yeah, well, look, you are not in danger of running into many people who are over encouraged. Okay. So, and you know what? If you do, great. And then move on to somebody else. Because there are people in your life, people in your church, people in your community, other pastors who need encouragement, just like you do. And so, yes, find someone. And if you can meet in person, do that as often as you can. If you can't, set up Zoom calls or phone calls. But man, do it. Set up some time with someone who will pour into your life and someone whose life you can pour into, and encourage to keep your eyes on Jesus, to stick around, to not throw in the towel, to not resign on a Monday, right? Where you can spur one another on.
Yep. Number 4, or now 3, I kind of lost count how we're really doing this, but find things to celebrate. Find some reasons to celebrate. And that might be like this week, nobody asked for you to resign. Find some reason to celebrate. There's something that, I've said in a few sermons now at our church. Sometimes we find it far easier to number our complaints than we do to count our blessings. Find some reasons to celebrate some blessings that maybe it's what God is doing in your family, that maybe your wife feels a little plugged in, or maybe your kids do, or you've noticed a volunteer kind of going up and stepping up and going above and beyond what you might do here. Recently, just this week, had 2 opportunities for those of you that may follow me on Facebook or whatever, where we had a situation at the church that required me to call and alert our safety team and just kind of let them know what was going on, ask if they had any advice, do we need to call the police, whatever it is. And instead of any of that, they volunteered to come up and just hang out in the office that day and just sort of be there and be really a sheepdog in a time where maybe the ladies would be kind of on their own because we would be out on a visit and some training time, and so they came up and gave up their entire afternoon, honestly, just to sit there and drink coffee. They enjoyed it, they loved it, but what they were doing, even though they were largely just sort of sitting, is they were a presence, and in a situation where we needed a little more assurance for our ladies and for our people that we were safe, they were there. And so I was able to share something about just how week in and week out they are there, and you don't always see them. Thankfully, I mean that's intentional. You don't know who they are, all that kind of stuff. We don't name them, we don't list them, but they're there and they serve week in and week out, often without notice, and that's intentional. But we're grateful for them because they keep us safe. They're our eyes and our ears on things that we never even know sometimes even happen. Like sometimes things don't even make it into the building because of situations that they can address outside. And so there's stuff like that. On Wednesday, I go over to our Crockett Connection ministry, which is where a middle school brings about 70 to 100 kids over to our gym and for fellowship and Bible study and stuff like that. And a kid rushes out of the gym just bawling his eyes out, so upset. And it just so happened that one of our volunteers that was arriving at that time sees him coming and just kind of gets down on his level. What's going on? And about 15 minutes later, that kid is back in there playing, having a great time. And about 10 minutes later, I'm talking to him and I say, "Hey, how's your day going?" "It's amazing, having a great day." Like his day completely turned around from this one person that just took some interest in him. And in that same time, as I'm seeing that, there's 3 ladies that are praying for the day ahead in that Crockett ministry. Then, you know, Caleb was in there preaching the gospel to, nearly 100 kids. Like in 10 minutes, just by keeping my eyes open, I saw 3 things I could celebrate. And not only did I celebrate it personally, like I was just grateful to see God moving in and through them, using them in creative ways, and to know that it was a better day because of those people. I've told people about it. I shared it in the
Yeah.
prayer meeting. We acknowledged them there. I put it on Facebook where a lot of our members, are connected, and so many of them were kind of tagging some of those folks and way to go, Barry, way to grow, some of that kind of stuff. And so, look, if you will just keep your eyes open, you can find a few things that you can count your blessings about instead of numbering your complaints. Kyle?
Yep. And here's the thing: if your church doesn't have stuff to celebrate, they will find stuff to complain about. That's the way it works. If you can find reasons to celebrate on Sunday morning, find something you can celebrate. My favorite thing that I've heard recently comes from Jonathan Smith at Texas Baptist, who has a fantastic plan for churches to celebrate baptisms. Because oftentimes what happens is we'll do a baptism right at the beginning of the service where maybe some of your folks aren't even in there yet and they miss it. And we do the baptism, we go on with the service. Jonathan has a fantastic plan to celebrate baptisms for 3 weeks. You get 3 weeks of celebrations. The first week you're going to announce, hey, next week we're baptizing so-and-so. Maybe you have a video where you show their testimony and you say, man, we want you to be here to celebrate. He's going to have some family here. We want you to be here with him. Then during the service, he suggests not baptizing at the beginning of the service, but waiting a little bit, maybe waiting a couple of songs in so that your people are in there when you baptize. And again, he'll recommend showing like a video testimony of the candidate, and then you introduce them, you baptize them, video it. If you don't live stream it, video it somehow. And then the next week you show it again saying, hey, last week we baptized this guy and we just wanted to share that story with you all that missed it. And so you get 3 weeks to celebrate a baptism. We make a big deal about somebody trusting Christ, somebody being obedient in baptism. And man, you do that, it's going to change the culture of how your church understands baptisms and will create a whole bunch of excitement around that. And then, like Matt said, man, just look for volunteers that you can recognize, marriages that you can celebrate, new babies. Like, look for things to celebrate. Look for excuses to celebrate as often as possible. That will encourage you. That will encourage your folks. And hopefully that will give them some things to be happy about rather than grumbling about all the things that they're not happy about.
Yep. Well, and after that, what do they need to do, Kyle? They need to keep their eyes on the Astros in first place in the AL West. What do they need
that
to
is not encouraging. No, they need to keep their eyes on Jesus. And this comes straight out of Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Since we're surrounded by such a large cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus. Now, this is the last one, but it's obviously the most important, right? You've got to keep your eyes on Jesus through the good days, through the bad days. It might be a deacon's wife that is a trial, right? I just like how he says various trials, because it's all encompassing. You're going to face some hardships and keep your eyes focused on Jesus. Count it all joy. Paul would tell us in Colossians 3 to not get distracted by the stuff around us, but instead to focus on Jesus. And again, if all you're focusing on are problems and angry emails and angry people, you're going to get discouraged. If you get your eyes up and focus on Jesus, you will find those reasons to celebrate.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we love you. We appreciate you. We hope that you make it. We hope that you last. And some of the ways that you can go a long way in doing that is deleting your resume, being an encourager, right? Numbering your blessings, looking for reasons to celebrate things you can celebrate, and also keeping your eye on Jesus. A few other things we could add is get some exercise. Take your days off.
Yep.
Go on a vacation. Drink water. Rest. Get a counselor. Spend time in God's Word. There's all kinds of other things we could last. Some of those, we hope that over time you have learned. But just keep those in mind as well. Drink some water, get some rest, go on some exercise, take your breaks, all of that kind of stuff. Get a counselor if you need it. But it's worth it to hang on and see a church revitalized, because sometimes it's just around the corner. Just keep pressing on. And until next time, may your coffee be as black as night and as bold as the gospel we declare. Take care.
What's wrong with you people?